Shalom all, this is your brother Martin, and I am showing you some Bible code artwork related to this lunar eclipse that's coming up, the blood moon that falls on May 15th, which happens to be a Shabbat this month at the end of this week. So there's a number of code tables that relate to this. I normally publish these as artwork that I've annotated, and if you don't know what these things are, I'm going to go to the first one. You can take a look at the video on my channel entitled Understanding Bible Codes. If I can figure out how to do it, I might just put a link up in one of the corners right now. Otherwise, go take a look at my channel. And this is the first one in a number of tables that myself and some other code searchers have found related to this event coming up. And then I guess we're getting pretty excited about it. The access term and so normally I annotate these and make them artwork, but I'm actually just showing you a bunch of these. I might show you one annotated after this, but right now I'm just showing you the raw data in the Code Finder program. And what you see here is the access term, which is 144,000. My brother Doug has a table on this that he's going to be publishing on his channel, so you'll be able to see some of the tables that he found related to this. But in this table, what I think is so interesting, I usually don't do narrow tables like this. It's at a very small skip of 35, well, negative 35. And it has some interesting terms in it. The current year, so this Hebrew year 5782 lines up with 2022, Gregorian. Blood moon, the plumb line, virgins, Mariah, which I won't explain except to say that I'm going to put a link to a video called Some Things You Need to Know that gets into Mariah, Shema, and the return of David and all that stuff, and you can take a look at that, which has all the kind of scriptural references to it. I'll link that in the description. This term, to be expectant, to the wilderness, the arriving, and the sign of Jonah. First term here is this term, the 144,000. And if I open up to the wilderness and just isolate it, stacked vertically, so at twice the skip of 144,000, we have to the wilderness. And now if I won't get into the scripture around this, but I think the pattern of this table is really interesting, and I'm going to get into some other related tables in the same data set. So what I'm doing is a data set in Code Finder where I'm pivoting. It's like a 3D crystal, and I'm pivoting to 2D slices through it at different access terms, so you can see the topic that this data set covers. Next term in this particular table is here, also vertical. This term is the arriving. Again, anything vertical means it's a multiple of the skip of the access term, and usually that means that there's some significant relationship between the two. Some other terms which I think are really interesting because of their relationship to the access term is the term virgins. So you see that going up above the access term. We have the year 5782, which is at the top of the table. We have the plumb line, which is just below the access term. So plumb line, there's two things that refer to weighing someone's character during the process of passing judgment. And those would be the balances or the scales, and the other one is the plumb line. Plumb line being the thing that you use in carpentry to make sure that a wall is standing straight up, right? And so that's a term used in lots of books in the Old Testament to refer to a measure of righteousness, is the plumb line. We have the blood moon. That's actually wrapping around the access term, as you can see. And as I said, the year is at the top of the table up here, at the top, which is He Ta Shin Pei Beit, which is 5782, which translates to Gregorian 2022. Now, in this data set, we have 15 ER, and it lines up perfectly this month. That is the 15th of May. It's not in this particular table, but it's in the other tables that I will show you out of this data set. And then the last term that we have is the dove, which is the sign of Jonah. We know that these events in solar eclipses, blood moons, all these things are signs in the heavens for us to watch. And so let me show you the next table I have. The next table is this one, which is in the Tanakh, with the access term, go out from Babylon, using the spelling from the Hebrew when the Israelites were told to go out into the wilderness, since we're talking about the wilderness here. So we've used the same Hebrew spelling, but to say go out from Babylon. And so I will go back to the overall table in just a minute, but I'm going to go back to the Code Finder program, and I'm going to zoom it up into the center so I can show you the scripture associated with the access term, because it's pretty cool. So we're this first so anyway, it's actually reading from the bottom up, right? So this is the go out, and then mem beit lamed. So I'll just start with this last lamed, because the impression I'm getting from all of these tables is that in the book of Isaiah, there's this pattern of, especially at the time of the end and in the tribulation, at all times when the house of Israel is not keeping the covenant, there's this pattern where the righteous get more righteous, or the Kodesh get more Kodesh, and the wicked get more wicked. And that's how he separates them. And that's to be put on the balances, or to use the plumb line, to separate the wicked from the Kodesh, or the righteous. And you see that here. This says what's going to happen based on that separation. He that trusteth in his riches shall fall, but the righteous shall flourish as foliage. This next one. A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that doeth shamefully is as rottenness to his bones. So this is talking about what befalls the wicked. Let's see what this one has to say. He that tilleth his ground shall have plenty of bread, but he that followeth after vain things is void of understanding. So again, this is so interesting that this is the scripture that shows up in these tables. Let's see what the mem says. The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Wow. Some of these I'm just seeing for the first time. The righteous is guided by his friend, but the way of the wicked leadeth them astray. This is amazing. Righteousness guardeth him that is upright in the way, but wickedness overthroweth the sinner. Oh, so these are all, this table's in the Proverbs. And this one happens to be teaching about, or rather speaking about, the separation of the Kodesh from the wicked. The teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death. Again, what happens to the wicked versus the righteous. Okay, and so let's look at the first one here, the pay. Evil pursueth sinners, but to the righteous good shall be repaid. So that's amazing. Let me go back and I'll show you. All right, now I'm going to switch over to some tables I presented in a discussion with a study group that I have, so that you can see some more on this topic and some of the comments that were said about these tables. Last night I get this table, which is blood moon, And the difference in what I was told to go and document is that when the Pesach happens, so this is the blood moon on second Pesach, right? I have those terms in here, but they're not in this table. They're in a data set, but they're not in the table. So what happened on the Pesach? So they had the Pesach, and then they went into the desert, the wilderness, right? And then on the next Shabbat, 7 days later, was when they were up against the Red Sea with the Egyptians bearing down on them and the sea was parted. So it was, the deliverance happened 7 days into the Shabbat at the end of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so if you look at the blood moon, so first off, you will see, I have searched all the years, right? The only one that comes up is 5782. And the bookending dates of 15 ER, which is because we're in a month within a month, it lines up exactly with the Gregorian. So that's the 15th of May, which is a Shabbat. And in this case, second Pesach in 5782. This is 7 days later, 22nd of ER, which happens to be 22nd of May because the month lines up this month. I put some of Doug's terms in here. So these are the same spellings as Doug's for virgin, Mariah, be expectant, the wilderness, or the arriving. And then I put dove in for the sign of Jonah. The other one that I put in there is the plumb line. And so my belief is that this 7 days is when everybody is measured against the plumb line, and then the deliverance is delivered on the next Shabbat. Or that's at least the pattern. But what's interesting about this table is where it is. Pay no attention to statistics. It's in a very small area in the book of Revelation. So if you go and look at these verses, you'll see that it relates to everything we're talking about.
Wow.
So, for instance, if we look at 15 ER, wait, which is the one that crosses? Sorry, yeah, this is the one that crosses. This is the next Shabbat. If you start looking at the scriptures, so this is the access term, which is blood moon. This is 22nd ER. If you look at the scriptures, right, in Revelation 19, this first character falls, and it was granted her to be clothed in fine linen, bright and clean, for fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And it just reads like this as I click through them. The next character falls in this line. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying, to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come ye, assemble unto this great feast of Yahuwah.
Marty, I do want to make it's not a correction, but an adjustment. The 14th is the Pesach, the 15th is the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Right.
The other part that I just wanted to point out, because we just found out last night, the 22nd through the 28th is when the WHO is going to be meeting to take over the world.
Coinky dink.
Yeah.
Not. I'm going to be observing this very similarly. In fact, I think on the,
like to think so.
I'm even going to go up on the mountaintop to watch the moon.
All right, so this next one is, and I saw thrones, and persons sat on them, and judgment was given to them, and the souls that were beheaded for the testimony of Yeshua and for the word of Yehoiah, and these are they who had not worshipped the beast nor its image, neither had they received the mark upon their forehead or on their hand, and they lived and reigned with their Mashiach those 1,000 years.
I'm getting excited in spite of
pretty
And
interesting
caught it?
table. And the
Yes.
sea gave up the dead in it, and the death and the grave gave up the dead in them, and they were judged each one according to his deeds. So
And
anyway.
we understand that the fifth and sixth seals are most likely going to fall open together. The fifth seal opens with the earthquake.
I also think it's interesting that the closest term for the plumb line has a skip of 7. Where is the plumb line in here? It's in here.
Right
What is the
across.
plumb line?
Aha, look at where it falls in the scripture.
And I
The
saw
plumb,
the
so
dead.
there's two terms that, or two imagery in the scriptures that stand for judgment. One is the scales or balances, and the other is the plumb line. So the plumb line measures how straight you are, basically. And I saw the dead great and small standing before the throne, and the books were open, and another book was open, which was the book of life, and the dead were judged from the things written in the books according to their deeds.
So good.
That is the second witness too.
Yeah, this
Yes.
would be the second witness. The term that I was originally looking for was return of David.
Ah,
Mm.
So if I pivot the table and do the search, I can show you what comes up. The fun things you can do with Code Finder in the Peshitta that you can't do with anything else.
It's almost like, isn't it?
It would make sense his return beforehand to set up the new kingdom.
Uh-huh.
So this is, so it's still calculating, but it'll probably be, it's done by the time I get the share up.
Uh-huh.
So this is Return of David. I haven't seen the table yet because I went and started working on that Blood Moon table. So this is the first time I've ever seen this table. So this is Return of David.
The plumb line. Oh, I like 5785.
Well, like I said, it's the first time I've seen the table.
can't make this stuff up.
3 years.
Woohoo.
Let's see where this is. Yeah, it crosses right over Return of David.
Ah, crap.
Yeah, they both cross right over.
Yeah.
Molly.
Mariah. I know.
No, this is probably an abacus effect.
What I want.
Are you guys saying that David is going to return?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm not saying it. Scripture says it.
Yeah.
Dude,
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ezekiel.
dude is
Yeah.
returning.
Once you realize that in the book of Ezekiel, then you start seeing it everywhere in the scripture.
Yeah, we call him Malak Dude.
I went over it in the video that I did last week.
Yes, I
And
saw that. That
share-
was excellent.
So,
We're-
yeah.
We're told by Yahushua that he's going to be our king, forever.
It's in
Oh, that does
Ezekiel
make sense.
37:24.
So let's see where this table is. Mark. Not a big area.
2 chapters. Seems to be a running theme these days with most of our tables. It's in 2 chapters. It's in 2 chapters.
Let's see, where is this?
Would that be in reference to like the bride or bridegroom?
Oh, look at that.
Oh my.
Oh yeah. I'm telling you, I can't make this stuff up.
Gosh, I bet you.
Nope. Nope, nope, nope.
That's Mariah.
Beshatau.
I had to skip a 1.
Yeah. That's probably an abacus effect to make it a skip of 1.
And a city will appear. And you will live in a house that your hands did not build. Mm, mm, mm. Mm, mm, mm.
So the
Wow.
plumb line vertical crosses Return of David.
Even Doug's table, when he referenced in Daniel, where was it? Daniel 7:13, one like the Son of Man.
Yeah,
That's David.
yeah.
Mhm.
We should do a palindrome table on that.
Hmm.
What
That's
else was?
that's the sign of Jonah.
Wow.
So this is what relates to the 7 days. On the 7th day after Pesach was finished, so it was the day after Pesach is finished is a Shabbat and feast, and starts not on second Pesach, but on the first Pesach. That's what starts Feast of Unleavened Bread, and at the end of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So Cliff's notes for all of you that haven't followed all of my tables: leaven represents corruption, but it also represents the thing that causes the fullness. So at the fullness of the Gentiles, you have the full leavening of the loaf of the nations.
Mm.
And so you have Yeshua the night before the Pesach breaking leavened bread with his disciples. He's indicating to his disciples they're going to go out as the leaven and leaven the loaf of the Goyim, or the nations. And then at the time of the fullness of the Gentiles, that's when we get into essentially where we are now. The tribulation and the end of days happens after the fullness of the Gentiles. And so you have this act of breaking leavened bread, and then as the perfect sacrifice, he removes all the corruption. And so immediately after, you have 7 days of eating unleavened bread, because the bread is no longer corrupted because of the sacrifice of Yeshua. And at the end of that 7th day, you have that's the next Shabbat. And what that indicates here in the table that we just saw before this table was that, and so in the original Pesach, on that day, that's when the Israelites were up against the Red Sea, facing certain death because of the Egyptian soldiers, at which point the miracle happened, parting the Red Sea and allowing them to escape, which was the first Exodus. And so what this indicates is that the period in between 15 ER, which, because we're in a month within a month, that lines up perfectly this year, 15th ER is also the 15th of May, and 22 ER is also the 22nd of May. It means that 7-day period from the previous table is the thing that is used as the plumb line. And so if you're talking about, the WHO declaring that they're going to take over the world, they're doing that on the 22nd of ER. So essentially they are going to indict themselves out of the words of their own mouths.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. Right after the sacrificial lamb is chosen, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there are a few concepts to explain with the whole leavening and all that stuff, but hopefully,
Mhm.
hopefully I was clear.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that all together.
Breaking the bread, breaking the sin here, right?
Yeah, so there's a real symbolic difference between leavened bread and unleavened bread, and the metaphor of it for the nations with the leaven, which is, so the leaven is what causes essentially us to be the if you've ever seen the Identity Crisis video and you understand that we are Israel because we are the offspring of the 10 tribes, it's because Yeshua sent them out to the nations, that all of the people in the nations are now the offspring of those 10 northern tribes of Israel. But the problem is they've been corrupted by Babylon. And so the whole thing about him breaking leavened bread, then being sacrificed, and then observing 7 days of unleavened bread is that his sacrifice is what repurifies the loaves. The loaves represent the goyim, or the nations, which means all of us, basically.